Hey there guys, this is Richard, your host with another marvelous video. Silent Hill is an iconic psychological survival horror video game that was released in 1999. The game became so critically and commercially successful that it gave birth to the Silent Hill franchise. There have been 8 major releases in the franchise, with the last major release being Silent Hill Downpour in 2012. Since then, there have been more releases like an HD collection, Book of Memories, PT, and so on. Now, what makes this franchise so iconic? Well, there are many factors. One major one is the monsters. There's a vast and diverse range of monsters across the many games that have been released in the franchise, and fans have always loved to speculate and theorize about them, their origins, their symbolism, strategies to beat them, and so on. Here, we discuss all the monsters in the Silent Hill franchise that we've grown to love so much. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Pyramid Head. Pyramid Head, also known as Triangle Head or Red Pyramid Thing, is a humanoid monster that first appears in Silent Hill 2. He has a pyramid-shaped red helmet that obscures his face, and he wields a large rusty knife called the Great Knife as his weapon of choice, while also wielding another weapon called the Great Spear. Pyramid Head is a manifestation of the protagonist, James Sunderland's guilt, as well as his desire for punishment. The reason for Pyramid Head's existence is to keep James human and to aid him to remember his past actions. Pyramid Head is the judge, jury, and executioner. And while his actions are horrific, he's the driving force for someone to come to terms with what they've done. Pyramid Head's actions display a shocking level of brutality. He's shown to sexually assault and violently kill other monsters in the franchise. His punishment for his victims is extreme and torturous. In designing Pyramid Head, the creators wanted to develop a chaser monster with a hidden face that would appear inhuman as well as disturbing. Pyramid Head's pyramid-shaped head has been inspired by the lower portion of a German World War II tank. Pyramid Head was transformed into the bogeyman in Silent Hill Homecoming, where he was a creature of vengeance and justice who existed to inflict punishment on those who deserved it. Pyramid Head is also vaguely related to Valtiel. It's unknown what Pyramid Head looks like underneath his helmet, as the creators have stated that they've never designed his face. Pyramid Head possesses an instant death-kill move, so the player must stay away from him. The best strategy is to use a handgun while staying in the corner. There are also invincible Pyramid Heads in the game. Overall, Pyramid Head is one of the most iconic and complex monsters in the Silent Hill franchise, having turned into an almost flagship mascot. He's made an appearance in several spin-offs of Silent Hill and has also been in the Silent Hill movies, comics, and novels. Schism. Schism is a tall, pale and lanky humanoid monster with an elongated head that ends in a blade, resembling a pendulum, which is its main choice of attack, along with its claws. Its right arm and hand are double-jointed and elongated, facing backward. Its left hand, however, faces forward. It has no apparent genitals, having a metal plate there instead. Schisms are known for their great speed, although they're apparently blind because they lack eyes. Thus, Schisms cannot find the player if they're totally silent and remain motionless. The split head represents the protagonist, Alex Shepard's mental state, as he's separated from core reality, similar to what happens in the disease schizophrenia, which was once referred to as split personality disease. The name Schism derives from the religious term, which implies a split or division within a religion or any organization. In that sense, the monster Schism could be a symbolic representation of the broken pact between the people of Shepherd's Glen, the Order, which is a religious cult, and their god. The Schism most likely, however, represents Alex's guilt over his role in Joshua's death. The pendulum-like look of the Schism could also be an allusion to the swinging pendulum, which was a medieval torture device used to force people to confess, implying that Alex must come clean about Joshua's death and must be constantly reminded of his guilt. Schisms are capable of reducing half the health of the player using their single pendulum-like blade attack and have a grappling attack capable of instantly killing Alex. The best option to kill a Schism is to use a shotgun or an equivalent firearm. If forced into a melee situation, the best way to go is with a pipe or knife and use quick combos. It's hard to kill Schisms if they're in large groups. Overall, Schisms are considered one of the more interesting and symbolic monsters in the Silent Hill franchise and appear first in Silent Hill Homecoming, while also appearing in the spin-off game Silent Hill Book of Memories. The God. The God is the outcome of a somewhat failed ritual to resurrect the deity of Silent Hill, Maine, and is encountered as a final boss in Silent Hill 3. The god is a huge, half-skeletal being having a face that resembles an almost broken porcelain mask. She's twisted and malformed, with her legs ending in her knees. Her spine and pelvis are also visible. The god was also the hardest model for the creators of the game to design. Apparently, the god has no intelligence and resembles more of a baby, lacking consciousness, awareness, and sentience. She has a powerful roar, but is apparently blind because her eyes are always closed. The god attacks with her long arms in wide sweeping motions, and is also capable of headbutting well and using fire. She's strong against melee weapons, so it's best to avoid them. The katana might be the only melee weapon that could work. A submachine gun or shotgun is the best way to go. One discovered approach is using a weapon called Maul and attacking from the side by exploiting her blind spot. The god has been created in an apparent resemblance to Alessa Gillespie, who happens to be the protagonist, Heather Mason's last incarnation, as well as the antagonist, Claudia Wolff's childhood friend. In the majority of the game, the god was nourished in Heather's womb and by Heather's hate for Claudia. This immense hate results in the monstrosity and twisted nature of the god. Overall, the god is a popular and powerful character, being the final boss of Silent Hill 3 as mentioned before. There are many rewards to defeating her, like an unlimited submachine gun if the player uses a melee weapon on the second playthrough, or the trophy achievement Blasphemy if the player is able to defeat the god in under 8 minutes. Asphyxia. Asphyxia is a boss monster that the player faces in the game Silent Hill Homecoming. She's the manifestation of the judge and cultist Margaret Holloway's memories of her daughter Nora, whom she had sacrificed through suffocation in order to maintain a pact with the Order, which is a religious cult and their god. This suffocating aspect is why Asphyxia bears its name. Asphyxia bears a resemblance to a collection of female bodies fused together in a chain in a gruesome manner. She possesses a pair of legs that ends in hands, along with dozens of arms and hands that she uses to walk like a centipede. Asphyxia doesn't have eyes. The main attack of Asphyxia is to strike with her 4 main arms in a series of 3 swings. She's also capable of spinning around and striking with her long tail portion. However, she's not difficult to dodge, and the weakness of her tail portion can be exploited in order to stun Asphyxia. Breathing is fatal to Asphyxia, and the player can finish her off by parting her covering hands and forcing her to breathe. It's interesting to note that Asphyxia's corpse is absent after she's killed. Overall, Asphyxia is a popular, if not highly sexualized monster in the Silent Hill franchise. Nurses. The nurses are a regular monster in the Silent Hill games, appearing in almost all of them. There are various varieties of nurses depending upon the game. In the original Silent Hill game, nurses were called puppet nurses. They're nurses who worked at a hospital called Alchemila, but got infected and controlled by parasites. They have a humpbacked appearance and carry scalpels, which they can use to attack. Unlike a lot of other monsters, they exhibit a degree of intelligent behavior. Then there are Bubblehead nurses, who appear in Silent Hill 2, as well as a few spin-offs. They're a manifestation of the protagonist James Sunderland's subconscious, and are one of the first enemies encountered in the game. They wield a steel pipe, but are not difficult to kill, especially from range. Bubblehead nurses are called Bubblehead because their head has a swollen appearance, resembling the late wife of James, Mary Sunderland's swollen head during her illness and hospitalization. The nurses in Silent Hill 3 have a more human but bloody appearance. Nurses equipped with a handgun are quite dangerous. Those with pipes are less dangerous, but those with revolvers also pose much danger. In this game, the nurses are a manifestation of the mind of the protagonist, Heather Mason, who has a hatred of hospitals due to her painful hospitalization. Faceless nurses are found in Silent Hill Origins and are almost identical to Bubblehead nurses. They use syringes and scalpels as their mode of attack. Faceless nurses possibly represent the protagonist Travis Brady's sexual anxiety and his discomfort around women. There are also Dark nurses, who appear both in the Silent Hill film and its sequel. They are influenced by Bubblehead nurses, but are highly sexualized. Demon nurses appear in Silent Hill Homecoming and Downpour. They're the first enemy that is encountered in the other world, which exists on a different plane of existence. The difficulty in killing these demon nurses increases as the game progresses. Demon nurses may represent the protagonist, Alex Shepard's institutionalization in a mental hospital and his resultant suppressed libido. Overall, the nurses, along with Pyramid Head, are regarded as one of the most important and iconic monsters in the entire Silent Hill franchise. They're popular because of their omnipresence and variety. Abstract Daddy. Abstract Daddy, also known as Ideal Father, is a boss monster appearing in Silent Hill 2. Abstract Daddy can generally be found in the claustrophobic areas of Silent Hill, Maine. Abstract Daddy resembles 2 figures intertwined in an intimate position over a bed frame. He's a manifestation of the trauma Angela Orozco sustained from the sexual abuse by her father and brother. It's also an abstract manifestation of the memories of James Sunderland's terminally ill wife. As James went deeper into his delusions, his nightmares crossed with that of Angela's, wherein he encountered Abstract Daddy. Abstract Daddy's attacks, generally using its slit, require close contact and thus can be countered using a shotgun or rifle from range, while running from end to end. Overall, Abstract Daddy has emerged as a popular monster due to its appearance, behavior, as well as its funny name. Missionary. The Missionary is a significant boss in the game Silent Hill 3 and is first seen on the roof of Heather Mason's apartment after murdering her father. The Missionary has been utilized by Claudia Wolff in order to attack Heather Mason. The Missionary is a tall, humanoid monster that exhibits intelligence enough to be able to follow orders. He wears a brown sack over his head and a noose around his neck. He also wears a robe and is constantly twitching. The Missionary has a human face with an expression of pain, as well as covered eyes, making him possibly blind. The Missionary attacks with bladed weapons and is extremely quick-footed. His reflexes are superb, and he's able to deflect bullets using his weapons. Against him, the best option is a shotgun or a katana. There's some debate over whether the word missionary is intended in a religious context, or it simply means someone on a mission, i.e., hired to kill. The Missionary is indeed a member of the religious cult The Order, and is directly commanded by Claudia Wolff. It's interesting to note that the Missionary happens to be the first monster in the Silent Hill games to kill a protagonist. Overall, the Missionary is an interesting and popular character that's also seen in one of the Silent Hill movies, Silent Hill: Revelation. Pendulum. Pendulums are large, hovering monsters that first appear in Silent Hill 3. They appear like two human torsos cut in half, connected at the hips by a circular metal device that allows it to spin on itself. It has a blade attached to each of its heads, and it makes a loud screeching sound, similar to rusty metal grinding. Pendulums tend to float in mid-air before starting to slash with their blades. It's very difficult to use melee weapons against them, so firearms are the weapon of choice. Pendulums hide in dark areas, but their signature noise gives them away. Pendulums do not attack alone, and are generally seen in groups, making avoiding them altogether or fleeing not a bad decision. The name Pendulum came from the monster's method of attack and the way the bodies rotated. There's no particular symbolism behind the origin of Pendulum per se. The rotations of the creature may refer to the cycle of rebirth that Alessa Gillespie underwent to become Heather Mason. Overall, Pendulum tends to be a very annoying but popular monster in the Silent Hill franchise. Mannequin. The Mannequin happens to be both a headless and an armless monster that the player will encounter in Silent Hill 2. Mannequins tend to lie dormant until the player is near them, and then they attack. Mannequins stand completely still in plain sight, resembling statues. Mannequins are not very strong, though they're hard to detect, and can trick the player by blending into the environment. The best way to deal with them is to use either a shotgun or a wooden plank. Mannequins are a manifestation of the protagonist James Sunderland's unconscious mind, and happen to also be among the 9 delusions that he faces throughout the narrative of the game. Mannequins also represent James's libido and sexuality, as well as his memories belonging to a hospital. They lack a proper human appearance because James refuses to remember who they represent or what he did to his wife, whom he killed. Mannequins, similar to other monsters in the game, are brutally tortured and executed by Pyramid Head in an attempt to erase James's delusions. Overall, mannequins are popular monsters mainly because of their stealth, as they can hide while being undetected by radio static. Bogeyman. The Bogeyman is an antagonist of the game Silent Hill Downpour who serves as the protagonist Murphy Pendleton's personal tormentor. He'll stalk the player everywhere and can be momentarily invincible. The Bogeyman has been linked to Pyramid Head and the Butcher on various occasions. Similar to the two just mentioned monsters, he's the protagonist Murphy's personal manifestation, drawing the equivalents to Pyramid Head or the Butcher. The Bogeyman is a huge humanoid, bigger than most other creatures in the game. He wears a black raincoat and his face is completely obscured by a gas mask. His signature weapon is a sledgehammer, made from a cinder block at the end of an elongated axe handle. The Bogeyman is extremely menacing, with a kind of ruthless brutality. He'll not shy away from killing a child. The Bogeyman's sheer strength is inhuman, and he can kill the toughest of monsters with one slow but fatal swing of his sledgehammer. The Bogeyman is also capable of producing precise shockwaves that can travel great distances. Unlike the Pyramid Head though, the Bogeyman doesn't represent guilt or judgment. The Bogeyman represents the irrational thoughts of a person's general need to avoid their own insecurities and mistakes by placing the blame on an abstract concept called the Bogeyman. He also represents the notion of self-destruction brought about by revenge and the dehumanization of it. Overall, the Bogeyman is an important, feared and respected monster in the Silent Hill universe. Twin Victim. The Twin Victim, also referred to as Doublehead, is a monster that's encountered in Silent Hill 4. They look like conjoined twin babies who happen to be sleeping. Twin victims have enormous arms, which they use to stand as they have no legs. Twin victims don't attack the player unless they wander too close to them or provoke them. Otherwise, twin victims behave indifferently. Twin victims are capable of dealing quite heavy damage, and their long arms give them a surprisingly long reach. Interestingly, when they fall on being attacked, twin victims start sobbing as if throwing a tantrum. This is the golden opportunity for the player to immediately stomp on them and finish them off. Weapons such as steel pipes, aluminium bats, and rusty axes work well against twin victims, especially if the player strikes quickly and continuously. Stopping the attack even momentarily allows the twin victim to counterattack. A revolver may be used, but the player shouldn't waste ammo bullets on twin victims, and instead use other methods. Twin victims are a manifestation of Silent Hill 4's main antagonist, Walter Sullivan's 7th and 8th victims, Billy and Miriam LaCaine. Overall, twin victims are an important monster because they hold the distinction of being Masahiro Ito's favorite Silent Hill monster. Masahiro Ito is, of course, the legendary art director and creature designer of the Silent Hill games. Valtiel. Valtiel is a monster in Silent Hill 3 and Revelation, as well as being a governing angel in the religious cult The Order. His name is derived from the word valet, implying that he's an attendant of God. Valtiel is humanoid in appearance, with a vibrating head and a constant twitch, also wearing ceremonial robes. He plays a passive role in the game and shadows the protagonist, Heather Mason, throughout the narrative of the game. Valtiel is said to be one of the beings created by God in order for people to obey her. Unlike most other monsters, Valtiel doesn't appear to be the manifestation of any person's subconscious or emotions. He's possibly a unique being that exists in the other world, independent of humans and serving God. The connection between Pyramid Head and Valtiel is such that Pyramid Head is said to be the shape of Valtiel's reason for existence. The Butcher also resembles Valtiel, although he possesses a much more violent and bloodthirsty nature. Overall, Valtiel is one of the more mysterious monsters in the game, and a lot of fan theories exist as to his exact nature and origin. Conjurer. The Conjurer happens to be the final boss of Silent Hill 4. The Room. Its appearance resembles a monstrous and humanoid corpse, reminiscent of a maldeveloped fetus. The Conjurer is an otherworldly incarnation of Walter Sullivan, created from his remains. It represents a facet of Walter's soul and being, as well as his desires and state. The Conjurer itself doesn't pose much of a threat during battle, but Walter's ghost, the true threat, will remain invincible as long as the Conjurer remains intact. 8 special spears called the Spears of the Holy Mother must be collected and jabbed into the Conjurer. When this is done, the Conjurer cries out and goes limp, rendering Walter's ghost vulnerable as opposed to invincible from before. Walter's ghost fights with a pipe and a handgun, and can deal a great amount of damage, much more than any other enemy in the game. When the player finally manages to defeat Walter, the Conjurer roars in pain and fades. Overall, the Conjurer is a popular and formidable creature in the series, and enjoys the status of being a final boss. Screamer. The Screamer is a monster that appears in Silent Hill Downpour, and possesses the ability to stun the player with a penetrating scream. The Screamer is humanoid in appearance and resembles a woman in high-heeled boots and a tattered dress. Screamers are one of the most common enemies in the game. It's not very powerful, but has some unique abilities that can make it dangerous. The Screamer attacks with her hands, which are permanently affixed in a fist due to several nails being driven through her fingers. Screamers have the ability to alert and call other Screamers to help them in battle. They can also jump on the back of the player, during which the player must follow on-screen prompts to shake them off. While facing multiple types of opponents, it's wise to kill the Screamers first. The symbolism with respect to Screamers is varied, and they could represent many things. One could be the wife of the protagonist, Murphy, and how she abandoned him. Another representation could be that of the psyche of Sanchez, a sexual predator in the game. Finally, Screamers could also be the representation of the anger that the antagonist, Annie Cunningham, has on the protagonist, Murphy, in response to her father's murder. Overall, Screamers are popular and quite common enemies, tough to fight in groups, and are most recognized for their piercing screams. Needler. The Needler is a monster that's encountered in Silent Hill Homecoming, being first found in an elevator, during which 5 of them attack the player by breaking through the walls of the elevator. The Needler is somewhat humanoid and arachnid, or spider-like, with a masculine torso, but instead of arms and legs, it has very sharp blades that it uses to locomote as well as attack. The Needler doesn't seem to possess a head, however, it has a mouth in between its legs. Needlers appear in most areas of the game, whether it's on the ground or on the ceiling. They move very fast, and it's recommended to use ranged weapons against them instead of melee. Needlers have the ability to dodge as well as block attacks. It seems to be more intelligent than most other monsters, as it tries to seek shelter when gravely injured. injured. An axe, crowbar, or knife could be used to defeat the Needler, especially with a single axe hit that could do the job. The Needler is possibly a physical manifestation of the way the protagonist, Alex Shepard, perceives his brother, Joshua's birth. The needles themselves could represent hypodermic needles in the context of a hospital and injecting medication. The Needler's severed head could also be a foreshadowing of the manner of Joshua's death via a broken neck. Overall, Needlers are popular monsters among the fans, especially because of their intelligence and ability to block attacks. Lurka. The Lurka is a relatively common monster that's encountered in Silent Hill Homecoming. They're semi-aquatic and can be found on both land and underwater, and resemble a disfigured mermaid. Lurkers are bald, male humanoid monsters with hook-like claws and sickle-like blades. They have a tendency to crawl out of small hiding places and ambush the player. Lurkers can also be found in flooded buildings. Although Lurkers move slowly, they attack quite fast by swiping the player with their long claws. Despite being a powerful opponent, Lurkers lack lengthy stamina. The best way to deal with them is to target their head. Lurkers possibly represent the restraint that the protagonist, Alex Shepard, has felt through his life due to lack of love from his family. They could also represent Alex's feelings regarding the inability to find his brother. Alex's intended fate of drowning could also be a factor here. Because the body of the Lurka is sewn together vertically, the symbolism is that it was split open once and sewn shut, alluding to Alex's repressed memories of Joshua's death. The slit mouth of the Lurka resembles cuttable doorways leading to secret locations, alluding to the secrets Alex's father kept from him, or the secrecy around Shepherd's Glen in general. Overall, Lurkers are popular due to their versatility on land and water, as well as their swift force of attack. Lisa, PT. Lisa is a ghost that appears in the playable teaser, PT, that was released in 2014 with the intention of being a demo for the cancelled Silent Hills game. She was shot by her husband in the right eye and stomach while pregnant and thus killed. Her husband later regretted this and possibly committed suicide. Lisa is unusually tall and lean and emits a sound of hysterical sobbing and laughing. She has the ability to possess the player. When possessed, if the player turns around, Lisa will brutally attack the player. Lisa's missing right eye and blooded stomach are references to how her husband shot her. Her baby that died most likely appears as an underdeveloped fetus in the bathroom that's situated within the never-ending hallway that Lisa haunts. Overall, although not technically a Silent Hill monster, Lisa has gained popularity among fans and has inspired characters in horror indie games such as Layers of Fear. Mary. Mary is the final boss of Silent Hill 2 and appears in the form of a diseased corpse, suspended in a metal frame, upside down and screaming. Mary has various attacks. One of them is summoning a swarm of flesh-eating moths from her mouth. Another attack is using her tentacles as a whip or to strangulate the player. In order to win, the player needs to inflict a considerable amount of damage onto Mary, so it's recommended to save up ammunition. It's extremely difficult to attack Mary with a melee weapon, so it's best to use a ranged weapon, such as a rifle. Mary's monster form represents and embodies James's conflicted emotions towards Mary during her final days. Her metal frame possibly symbolizes Mary's sense of confinement while being bedridden. Mary's use of her tentacles to strangle James is a reference to how James had asphyxiated her. There are theories ranging from Mary being a hallucination to her being a physical manifestation of James's guilt. Another interesting theory, one that's validated in certain endings of the game, is that the monster Mary is actually Maria, the primary antagonist of Silent Hill 2, who's simply deceiving James in order to torture him. Overall, Mary is an important and popular character in the Silent Hill universe, enjoying the status of being the final boss. Wheelman. The Wheelman is the penultimate boss in Silent Hill Downpour and appears throughout the game, albeit in much lesser forms. The Wheelman resembles a giant, thin corpse fused with a wheelchair and life support equipment. Since it's such a massive creature, it's pointless to confront it directly. Instead, the player must remove all 4 of his life support hoses. The Wheelman attacks using various methods, including fist slams. He has telekinetic powers and is able to create distortions in the air and gather loose debris in a cluster to hurl at the player, which can be countered effectively using a shotgun. The Wheelman can also, seemingly unintentionally, summon huge bolts of lightning on the player's location. The Wheelman is a manifestation of Frank Coleridge, the upright police officer who believed in and had faith in the protagonist Murphy while he was in jail. Frank was murdered by a corrupt police officer, but the blame was put on Murphy. The Wheelman represents Murphy's feelings of guilt and responsibility over the role he played in Frank's death. The Wheelman could also represent Murphy's conscience and his poor choices. Frank, like the Wheelman, when brutally beaten, was confined to a wheelchair in a crippled vegetative state before passing away. In this way, the Wheelman could be a manifestation of Frank's daughter, Anne Cunningham's psyche, instead of Murphy's. Overall, the Wheelman is a very important and complex character in the Silent Hill franchise, while obviously enjoying major boss status. Grey Children. Grey Children, also known as Demon Children, are childlike, knife-wielding monsters who also have a ghost form called Stalkers. Grey Children appear only in the North American version and not in the Japanese version where they're replaced by Mumblers. This is due to censorship issues, as their appearance was deemed to be too similar to that of a child. Grey Children, as mentioned before, are childlike creatures carrying knives that continuously burn from the inside out, shrieking the scream of a child in immense pain. They walk quickly and generally attack in groups. They leap at their victim, grabbing them by the legs and pinning them down. The best way to deal with Grey Children is the usage of a handgun. One interpretation of the Grey Children is that they're the distorted version of Alessa Gillespie's classmates, who used to group together and bully her, similar to how Grey Children group together and attack the player. Grey Children are the first monsters in the series, and are also the first monsters to use weapons. They make an appearance right at the beginning of the Silent Hill movie, swarming the protagonist, Rosa da Silva. Overall, Grey Children are an interesting and controversial part of the Silent Hill universe. Leonard Wolff. Leonard Wolff was the abusive father of Claudia Wolff, who was the main antagonist in Silent Hill 3. He was also a former member of the religious cult The Order. Leonard Wolff appears reptilian in nature with a coat of yellow skin covering him. His hands are a pair of bladed bones that he uses to attack. Leonard Wolff is a very aggressive opponent, although he spends much of the fight underwater, trying to stay out of the player's attack range. He's an excellent swimmer, which makes it very difficult for the player to keep up. When Leonard Wolff comes out of the water, he flails his blades and causes a great deal of damage. His pace above water isn't great, and that's what the player must exploit. Leonard Wolff is weak against firearms as well as the weapon called Maul. The symbolism of Leonard Wolff is complex, as he may just be a normal human being that the player sees as a monster. However, there are some indications that he actually may be a monster, having been corrupted by his own madness and the other world. Leonard Wolff's large swollen arms may allude to the fact that Claudia Wolff was physically beaten by Leonard Wolff. Leonard Wolff also makes an appearance in the movie Silent Hill Revelation, both in human and monster form, as an ex-priest of the Order. The One Truth. The One Truth, also known as the Dummy, is one of the few bosses in Silent Hill 4, The Room. It's a larger and more powerful version of the Wheelman, which is a monster that appears almost everywhere in the game. The One Truth has the ability to scale up and down walls, and its metal frame can go up and down a pair of bars that support it, allowing it to evade attacks. During the boss fight, the player must fight the One Truth along with several of his dummies. Thus, the player must find and defeat the real boss monster among his dummies. The attack of the One Truth is much like that of the Wheelman, swinging its powerful arms. The dummies of the One Truth are quite powerful and at times seemingly immortal. There are 11 dummies in total. The One Truth represents the guardian of the mother of the main antagonist of the game, Walter Sullivan. Mother here refers to the room that Sullivan was born in, room 302, which is an infamous location that plays an important role in the game's narrative. The One Truth could also be representative of the twisted so-called truths that the Order spreads. Overall, the One Truth is an interesting character with diverse symbolism, which also enjoys boss status in the Silent Hill universe. Closer. The Closer is a pretty common monster in Silent Hill 3, who is the first type of monster the player encounters, aside from a dream sequence. The Closer's body seemingly mocks the female form, as its face has a pair of lips, and it seems to be wearing a miniskirt and dark boots. However, it's tall and powerful, and has a loose relation to the monster Mandarin. Thus, despite its feminine design, it has rather masculine characteristics, as well as creating an androgynous feeling. Closers in general tend to move slowly, but their size and reach are so great that it makes up for it. Their main attack is the use of their club-like arms, or extending a blade-like bone fragment from the tips of their arms. Closers can also defend themselves by swinging their arms in a circle, a move that allows for very little reaction time on the part of the player. The Closer could be a manifestation of Alessa Gillespie's memories of her mother's abuse towards her. Punching bag nature of the Closer's arms could also be an allusion toward the protagonist, Heather Mason's repressed memories. There are conjectures that the Closer could be a distorted interpretation of real people, or it could symbolize one of the 7 deadly sins, greed. The Closer could also be connected to Claudia Wolff in some manner. Overall, the Closer is a common monster in the game, with an ambiguous look and powerful presence, and that makes it a popular character in the Silent Hill universe. Split Head. The Split Head is the very first boss in the entire Silent Hill series. It looks like a colossal lizard, but has an obscure and indiscernible face. The Split Head walks very slowly, but can cover ground quite quickly. The Split Head is a formidable opponent, but has a fundamental weakness inside its mouth, which it doesn't expose at first, and that the player must get it to expose. Using a shotgun, it's possible to wait for the mouth to open at the right time and shoot to inflict damage. Attacking with a melee weapon won't work, as all that's available at the time are the pipe and knife. The Split Head is the hellish incarnation and transfiguration of a great lizard in an elementary school fairy tale. It's manifested due to Alessa Gillespie's memories of school. Overall, the split head is an iconic monster in the Silent Hill universe, especially because it's the very first boss and a tough adversary. Incubus. The Incubus is the final boss in the Silent Hill game in 2 of its endings. The Incubus is based on an ambiguously gendered deity and has the head of a bull or goat with 2 long demonic horns. It has no visible eyes and it has a pair of large feathered wings. The attacks of the Incubus involve bolts of red lightning which can cause severe damage or even death. During the boss battle, Incubus remains completely stationary. The only strategy here is to dodge the bolts of lightning and hit it with a powerful weapon like a hunting rifle. Incubus is a manifestation of the deity that's worshipped by the religious cult known as the Order. In mythology, an incubus happens to be the male counterpart to a succubus and is one who seduces female human victims as they sleep. This meaning has a connection to Alessa Gillespie. The incubus's lightning attack may be a reference to the Bible. Overall, being the final boss of the first game, the Incubus is a highly popular monster in the Silent Hill universe. Scarlet. Scarlet is the second boss who is encountered in Silent Hill Homecoming. She appears as a tall, thin, monstrous doll whose body is made up of white segmented armor. Scarlet, as a boss in her second phase, is quite intelligent and aggressive. She emits high-pitched shrills and shrieks and attacks by swinging her long, clawed arms over and over again in an attempt to knock the player over. Scarlet can grab the player and attempt to sever their head. She's also capable of producing shockwaves. In her first stage, all of Scarlet's attacks are pretty avoidable, and her porcelain body shell must be destroyed in order to get to her second phase. This can be done easily using a fire axe or crowbar. In her second stage, Scarlet resembles a spider and crawls on all 4s at great speed. But as she now lacks armor, she's quite vulnerable to weapons. Scarlet in this phase can cause a good deal of damage. The most effective way to defeat her is by utilizing speed via the knife. Using the knife, the player can enter into an endless combo until Scarlet is all but dead. Scarlet happens to be a manifestation of either the memory of Scarlet Fitch, brought about by her father's terrible guilt, or a manifestation of Scarlet Fitch herself, who, having listened to her father's prayers, returned to physical form. Scarlet's rapidly beating heart could be a representation of the trauma Scarlet experienced as she approached her death by mutilation. Overall, Scarlet is an interesting monster who enjoys boss status. Monster Sybil. Monster Sybil, better known as Parasitic Host Sybil, is a major boss in the Silent Hill game and is created when Sybil Bennett, a major protagonist, gets infected by the same kind of parasite that affects puppet nurses and doctors. Killing Sybil results in the good or bad ending, while saving her leads to the good plus or bad plus ending. Monster Sybil looks a lot like her human self, only having red eyes and walking with a hunched back. She's capable of shooting the player with a handgun and can also pistol whip the player if he or she gets too close. Once she runs out of ammo, Monster Sybil will attempt to strangle the player. There's a special way to use the plastic bottle of unknown liquid found in Alchemila Hospital in order to exorcise the parasite out of Monster Sybil. If the player doesn't use this liquid and chooses to fight Sybil, he or she must do so in 2 phases. At first, Sybil uses a gun and the player must hold on until she runs out of ammo. The second phase is her using powerful melee attacks, wherein using a handgun or shotgun against her is the best way to go. On the other hand, the player can choose to save Sybil by using the unknown liquid in the plastic bottle found at Alchemila Hospital. This can be done at any point, at the beginning of the fight or in the second phase. There's a glitch in the game called the Larval Stalker glitch that allows the player to bypass the fight with Sybil entirely. Overall, Sybil is an interesting monster who can trigger multiple endings and enjoys boss status in the Silent Hill universe. Prisoner Juggernaut. Prisoner Juggernaut is a large, muscular monster in Silent Hill Downpour. In their first encounter, Prisoner Juggernaut rips off a metal gate in order to engage with the player. In addition to being encountered like normal monsters, they also try to grab Murphy through cell bars as he passes. Juggernauts are pale-skinned, human-like creatures with tattoos covering their bodies and their faces being twisted into a permanent grin. Juggernauts are huge and inhumanly strong. Juggernauts only appear in scripted encounters toward the end of the game. They use their devastating charge attack to get into melee range of the player and follow it up with a series of powerful strikes. When facing them, it's best to dodge their charge and use basic melee attacks. It's best to use firearms in this particular scenario. The Juggernaut possibly represents Murphy's fear of other inmates, or maybe the Juggernaut represents the inmates themselves. Specifically, the Juggernaut may represent a fear that the protagonist Murphy has of himself and the crimes he committed. Overall, the Juggernaut is a popular monster due to his immense strength and cool tattooed look. Alessa's Dream. Alessa's Dream is the final boss in Silent Hill Origins. It's possibly a pre-incarnate manifestation of the god of the religious cult known as the Order. Alessa's Dream looks like a demonic entity, being very well muscled along with having red skin. It has long claws and horns, as well as sharp fangs and 2 tentacles originating from its back that look like incomplete wings. During the game, when the player enters a nightmare-like state, he or she is forced to battle Alessa's Dream, who is savage in battle. It behaves similarly to the monster Incubus and has very powerful physical moves as well as demonic magic. Alessa's Dream will attempt to slash the player if he or she gets close, and follow them if they run. This creature can also open its chest up to create a powerful beam-like move of fire, while also being able to summon flaming rain. The best strategy against it is to use high-power firearms. Alessa's Dream possibly represents the Order's idea of what God could look like. It could also represent Alessa's fear of what God could turn out to be. Finally, it could also represent the protagonist, Travis Grady's own personal demons, as well as his general perception of the Order and its members. There has been some speculation that Alessa's Dream is actually Zukilbara, the Red God, himself. There are many arguments to support this theory, although it's not been confirmed. Being possibly related to a god as well as being a final boss, Alessa's Dream enjoys epic status in the Silent Hill universe. Robbie the Rabbit. Robbie the Rabbit is a human-like rabbit who's made many appearances in multiple Silent Hill games. He's a mascot of the Lakeside Amusement Park and has a lot of doll-based merchandise based upon him. Robbie the Rabbit's odd look and nature of existence is meant to discomfort the player. Robbie the Rabbit's first appearance came in Silent Hill 3. Large models of his likeness can be seen strewn across various areas of the Lakeside Amusement Park, resembling dead creatures. Robbie is one of the 4 animal mascots of this park. In Silent Hill 4, Robbie the Rabbit is seen on a bed belonging to Galvin, one of the protagonists of the game. A hot air balloon of his head with a bloodied mouth can also be seen in the game. In Silent Hill Arcade, Robbie the Rabbit is an actual enemy that appears in groups when the player visits Lakeside Amusement Park. They have high-pitched, squeaky laughs and wield a variety of weapons such as throwing axes, chainsaws, and shotguns. In Silent Hill Homecoming, Robbie the Rabbit can be seen as a doll that the player must obtain for his younger brother. In this manner, Robbie the Rabbit appears in several other Silent Hill games in many forms as well, apart from the ones we mentioned. He also appears in the second Silent Hill movie during a nightmare scene, apart from being featured in Lakeside Amusement Park. Overall, Robbie the Rabbit is a beloved character in the franchise that even manages to sell real-life merchandise. Mama is a boss who appears in Silent Hill Origins. She's a monstrous form of Helen Grady, the mother of the protagonist of the game, Travis Grady. Mama appears as a barely identifiable woman trapped in a bell-like iron cage, with her body being wrapped in cloth and her mouth permanently held open by a wire. Mama moves by swinging around while being attached to the ceiling. She sprays a grey gas and flails around with large spikes. Although she's very fast and can grapple, she can be defeated by running from corner to corner and shooting. Mama represents Travis's memory of his mother. Her mouth is frozen open in a scream, representing her desire for her son. Her cage state represents her stay at the Cedar Grove Sanatorium. Her spraying gas is symbolic of her attempt to kill herself and Travis by gas inhalation. Overall, Mama is an emotional and nostalgic character in the Silent Hill universe, who also enjoys boss status. Doll. The doll is a monster appearing in Silent Hill Downpour that attacks by spawning shadows, which are translucent silhouettes of itself, capable of movement. They're apparently related to Anne-Marie Cunningham, a corrections officer and important character in the game. Dolls are nearly stationary monsters, often posing like mannequins. They're humanoid creatures, resembling a slim woman with pale skin. Dolls are dressed provocatively, while some are completely undressed. The shadows of the doll are perfect silhouettes of the doll itself, and are nearly impossible to see. Dolls are very manipulative and try to trick the player into coming closer. Having limited mobility, they spawn shadows which can only be located using the UV beam of a forensic flashlight. Each time the player defeats a shadow, the doll takes damage. Dolls are also able to teleport. Dolls seem to be the manifestation of Anne-Marie Cunningham's guilt for cheating on Mark Cunningham with Leonard Trent, and her shattered innocence. As a result, dolls are highly sexualized and in turn popular monsters in the franchise. Butcher. The Butcher is a major antagonist in the game Silent Hill Origins and also appears in the spin-off game Silent Hill Book of Memories. The Butcher is a humanoid creature who resembles Pyramid Head in design, behavior, and function. He has a good build and wears a butcher's apron covered in blood. His signature weapon is a heavily oversized meat cleaver known as the Great Cleaver. The Butcher, like Pyramid Head, slaughters several monsters. His movements, unlike Pyramid Head, are fluid, calm, and controlled. To defeat the Butcher, the player must keep moving at all times and use all of his his or her throwable items. Using high-power firearms like a shotgun is also a good tactic. The artificial intelligence or AI of the Butcher is quite good, causing him to change direction fast depending on the particular situation. The Butcher has a lot of health points, and thus the fight against him is long and tedious. The Butcher represents the cruelty and sacrifice of the Order. His calm and cold slaughtering and torturing of monsters is a nod to the Order's tendency to murder and sacrifice human life for worship. The Butcher also represents the protagonist, Travis Grady's inner rage and pent-up anger. The Butcher may actually represent Travis himself, as is implied in the game. It could also represent what Travis fears about himself and what he could become. The Butcher's method of attacking genitals could also be associated with anger due to repressed sexuality. Overall, the Butcher is a major monster in the franchise that holds significant weight due to its association with the famed Pyramid Head. Armless Man. The Armless Man appears in both the Silent Hill movies and is an incarnation inspired by the monsters called the Lying Figures of Silent Hill 2. The Armless Man is a distorted, disfigured, but discernibly human-looking creature. It lacks arms, hence its name. He's able to spread an acidic toxin from his chest that's strong enough to melt through a motorcycle helmet and a leather jacket. In the first movie, the Armless Man is seen not long after the protagonist Rosa da Silva and police officer Sybil Bennett first arrive in Silent Hill. It hurls its toxin at them, managing to melt Sybil's motorcycle helmet and leather jacket, as stated before. Sybil shoots the creature but sees more of them coming and is forced to flee the scene, along with Rosa. In the second movie, the Armless Man appears briefly when the protagonist Heather Mason sees the otherworld version of the school that she attended. The symbolism behind the Armless Man is that it represents Alessa Gillespie's hospitalization, wherein she felt trapped, much like what the Armless Man embodies. The corrosive toxin spewed by the Armless Man could be symbolic of Alessa's developing rage. Overall, the Armless Man is one of the more impactful monsters in the Silent Hill movies due to its appearance, movement, and behavior. Lying Figure. Lying figures are humanoid monsters who can be found in Silent Hill 2. They are the first creature that the protagonist James Sunderland encounters in his journey through Silent Hill, Maine. Lying figures are the physical manifestation of his sick wife, Mary Shepard Sunderland, on her deathbed, while also representing James's internal suffering. Lying figures take the appearance of a hospital patient writhing in agony. While creating the lying figure, the designer of the creature, the famed Masahiro Ito, was inspired by BDSM fashion, Sir Francis Bacon's paintings, as well as the slick movements of a co-worker in a hoodie listening to music. Since they're a physical manifestation of James's subconscious, lying figures are among the 9 creatures tied to the 9 red squares. They attack by spewing a spray of poisonous mist from an opening in their torso, which has the capacity to knock the player back and force him to recover for a few seconds. Thus, it's best to attack them from a range and use weapons such as a handgun. A steel pipe is a good melee option in this case. Overall, lying figures remain a nostalgic monster for the protagonist, since it's based on the player's sick wife. They were also a design challenge, as it was meant to convey the effect of the uncanny valley with these monsters. Sad Daddy. Sad Daddy is a boss from Silent Hill Origins and appears as a monstrous form of the protagonist, Travis Grady's father, Richard Grady. Sad Daddy is fused to the Otherworld Room 500, hanging down from the ceiling and spilling in through the cage walls. He's split into 3 parts, one of which ends in a humanoid face. He's mostly immobile and uses his hanging tentacles to choke the player. Sad Daddy can also attack by vomiting a stream of blood. The best tactic against this monster is the use of a rifle or shotgun. Sad Daddy is a manifestation of Richard Grady's memory and the guilt that the protagonist Travis Grady suffers for feeling responsible for his death. Richard's method of suicide has influenced Sad Daddy's use of tentacles to choke the player. Overall, Sad Daddy remains a nostalgic monster for the protagonist. He's also considered one of the most underrated bosses in the franchise. Twin Feeler. The Twin Feeler is a boss from the original Silent Hill game and the larval form of the later seen monster and boss, the Float Stinger. It's an oversized moth larva, resembling a centipede with purple-colored blood. During the battle, the player can use the rifle, which is found in the same room as the boss, but ammo is limited at that point. The Twin Feeler spews harmful acidic green liquid and can also attack by burrowing itself in the sand. Once having taken enough damage, the Twin Feeler curls up and dies, but springs back to life shortly. Later on, the player encounters the Twin Feeler in his full adult form, the Float Stinger. The Twin Feeler is a representation of the fact that Alessa Gillespie had a lot of insect specimens in her room, including moths and butterflies. The Twin Feeler, being stuck in its larval stage, could also represent arrested development. Overall, the Twin Feeler is an interesting boss in the game. The creature is also very popular in-game for its valuable and extremely poisonous blood that black market apothecaries will often seek out. Smog. Smogs are stealthy humanoid monsters seen in Silent Hill Homecoming. They appear as disoriented humanoid males and have no arms. It spews a noxious black gas that continuously leaks from its mouth. Smogs are difficult to deal with because they're dangerous both at long and short range, and have a high amount of stamina. However, they lack speed. They attempt to stun the player using their black, noxious gas. The best way to deal with a smog is to shoot when their lungs are exposed, typically before they're right about to exhale their black, noxious gas. Smogs will relentlessly pursue the player, and it's possible to deal with smogs using melee weapons like fire axe or combat knife, but that requires a bit of playing experience. The black, noxious gas of smogs possibly symbolizes black lung disease that was common in coal mines. Chemical mustard gas, used in warfare, could also be a reference. The gas could also be a symbol of the smothering guilt the protagonist Alex Shepard suffers due to the death of his brother Joshua. Overall, smogs are strong creatures that are best avoided. They're related to other monsters in the game, such as lying figures and straitjackets. Insane Cancer. Insane Cancer is an enormous, obese humanoid monster that has huge strength. They appear in Silent Hill 3 and explode on defeat, making them lethal, even in death. Insane Cancer resembles a cancerous mass and is covered in fatty, bulbous flesh with pus-like secretions oozing from its open sores. Normally, it's best to avoid insane cancers, but they can be killed using a shotgun and knocking it down. Once it's knocked down, the maul can be used to finish the job. Insane cancers are able to regenerate their health by sleeping. Insane Cancer represents Silent Hill's corruption, like an evil, metastasizing cancer. It could also be a manifestation of the fetal god in the uterus of the protagonist, Heather Mason, slowly growing like a cancer and coming back after being killed. Overall, Insane Cancer is a powerful and highly symbolic creature. It holds the distinction of being the only creature designed by the game's director, Kazuhide Nakazawa. Greedy Worm. Greedy Worm is an invincible monster that appears in Silent Hill 4, The Room, as well as Silent Hill, the arcade. It's a colossal, lengthy creature with large width and slimy exterior. Greedy worms are not a particular threat. They're a manifestation of Walter Sullivan's worlds and can be seen burrowing into the walls and floors of structures in parallel universes. Greedy worms don't attack the player but can be attacked but not killed. Greedy worms symbolize and link Walter Sullivan's worlds, spanning across various universes. They're also a symbolic representation of the umbilical cord. In Silent Hill the arcade, the Greedy Worm is a minor boss who, unlike its other incarnations, is dangerous and chases the protagonists, Eric and Tina, for some time. Overall, Greedy Worms are unique monsters in the Silent Hill universe due to their invincibility. Amnion. Amnion is the final boss encountered in Silent Hill Homecoming and is possibly a manifestation of the protagonist, Alex Shepard's overwhelming guilt about inadvertently killing his own brother Joshua. Amnion is a female humanoid monster attached to a large mechanical apparatus with 4 legs, resembling a spider-like creature. Amnion has a wide attack radius and is able to knock the player down with most attacks. She can also take a great deal of damage. Amnion sprays a huge amount of damaging toxic bile from her mouth. After taking significant damage, Amnion will shift her form and will no longer depend on her mechanical legs. Her attacks in this new form are faster and more brutal. Her arms may get stuck, leaving her vulnerable to attacks for a short while. Amnion could possibly represent Joshua's anger toward Alex for his death, or Alex's guilt for his role in Joshua's death. She may be seen as a symbol of the sins of the Shepard family. Joshua's love of spiders may also have a role in the development of Amnion. Overall, Amnion enjoys status as a final boss and is considered among the most frustrating boss fights in the Silent Hill universe. Wall Corpse. Wall Corpse is a monster found in Silent Hill Downpour and is possibly related to the tormented soul. Wall corpses are disemboweled human torsos that are apparently female. It has no limbs and is impaled on a metal contraption with large spikes, which is a symbolism representative of the religious cult The Order. Wall corpses spray blood from their lower body as they scream in agony. Wall corpses generally don't need to be killed but must be avoided as they spray damaging blood-type substances. A related but more powerful creature with enhanced mobility and range called Wheel Corpses appear later in the game. Wall corpses symbolize imprisonment, torture, and pain. They are helplessly impaled in the same way the protagonist Murphy feels he's helpless against some of his actions. The female frame of the wall corpse might symbolize the pain Murphy's ex-wife went through due to the loss of their son. Overall, wall corpses are more environmental hazards than anything else, but are interesting monsters. Raw Shock. Raw Shock has the distinction of being the only hostile monster encountered in Silent Hill, Shattered Memories. Raw Shocks pursue the protagonist Harry Mason during nightmare sequences. Raw Shocks are pretty intelligent and have the capacity to work in packs to hunt down the player. Raw Shocks are hairless humanoids without any distinguishable traits. Raw Shocks adopt different traits based on the player's psych profile, which is a game mechanic affecting several aspects of the game. Raw Shocks are invincible, like the ghosts. There are several types of Raw Shocks. One of them is the feminine type, which has exaggerated exaggerated female traits. Then there is the disease type, which has bloated skin and fungi on their flesh. Abstract Rorschachs have their limbs turned into discs and heads shaped like crosses. Finally, atrophied Rorschachs have holes all over their body, giving them a disfigured look. Rorschachs, though invincible, can be hurt when the player lights a flare. These flares are the only way to keep them at bay. Rorschachs possess a decent amount of intelligence as they're able to write. Rorschachs have no offensive or defensive abilities apart from their ability to absorb body heat. They have high stamina and can pursue targets over long distances. Their only form of engagement is to hug the player and lower his body temperature. Rorschachs are symbols of repression created by the adopted daughter of Harry Mason, Cheryl Mason's mind, and are trying to stop Harry Mason from finding Cheryl. The hugging that Rorschachs do is a reference to Cheryl trying to hold on to her fantasy for as long as possible. Later on, as Cheryl begins to accept the truth about her father and his death, Rorschachs begin to freeze and shatter. The name of Rorschachs is a pun on the famous psychological test called the Rorschach test, which is a test based on a person's perception, much like the fact that the behavior of Rorschachs is based on the player's perception of the game. Overall, Rorschachs constitute a psychologically interesting and behavior-wise dynamic component of the Silent Hill games. Flesh Lip. Flesh Lip, also known as Lustful Lip, is a boss monster encountered in Silent Hill 2. They're a bloated, malformed mass of meat and flesh with human-like limbs. A pair of large lips appears at the bottom of the creatures, thus giving it its name. Its design is influenced by the works of Sir Francis Bacon. Flesh lips are slow-moving but dangerous. They'll try to grab and strangle the player with their feet. The best strategy against them is to use a shotgun before they get too close. The steel pipe and handgun are also possible weapons of choice in this scenario. The lips of Fresh Lips are supposed to symbolize the protagonist, James Shepard's wife, Mary's mouth, which abused him with cruel words during her last days. In Silent Hill Book of Memories, the Flesh Lip is no longer a boss and appears frequently, helping spawn other enemies into the room. Overall, the Flesh Lip is a monster that enjoys boss status in the Silent Hill universe. However, it's not considered a very difficult boss. Numb Body. Numb Body is a monster that appears in Silent Hill 3. They're relatively featureless and bipedal, waddling and hopping side to side. They resemble tadpoles. Numb Bodies are usually found in groups, although they're not that dangerous. Sometimes Numb Bodies may even ignore the player for a few moments altogether, until another Numb Body has started attacking the player. There are many size variants of Numb Bodies, and when attacked they emit moan-like calls, like that of an injured animal. Numb Bodies have that name because it captures the creature's slow and clumsy movements, as well as pale, frozen texture. There's no particular symbolism behind their existence. However, it could represent the premature state of God in Heather's womb. Numb Bodies in Silent Hill the arcade can produce a gaseous green ball and attack from a distance. Overall, Numb Bodies are strange-looking monsters that are popular because they have polarizing reactions. A lot of fans find them disgusting, but a few find them to be cute, especially the small ones. Memory of Alessa. The Memory of Alessa is a boss monster appearing in Silent Hill 3. She attacks with weapons that are normally in the protagonist Heather Mason's arsenal. The Memory of Alessa's attacks are weak but fast, and she's good at blocking. The katana is the best weapon against her. Once significantly damaged, the Memory of Alessa will collapse before manifesting elsewhere with a handgun. She'll also try to use a steel pipe as well as a machine gun in a number of returns from apparent defeat. At each return, she's stronger and faster. After being beaten 4 times, the Memory of Alessa will finally die. The Memory of Alessa is the imprint of Alessa Gillespie that's left in the other world due to her mind and powers. She's a manifestation of Alessa's mind that wants to stop God's birth. The Memory of Alessa also represents dark, painful emotions and suffering. In the second Silent Hill movie, the Memory of Alessa is seen trying to merge with Heather Mason in order to be the reborn Alessa Gillespie. Overall, Memory of Alessa enjoys boss status and is considered a laborious boss battle because of her 4 forms. Ghost. Ghosts are common enemies that are found in Silent Hill 4, The Room. They're a frequent annoyance and can't be killed or disposed of in a truly permanent way. They're actually tormented souls of Walter Sullivan's numerous victims. Ghosts attack by reaching into the player's chest and grabbing their heart, causing damage. There are 2 series of ghosts, old types and new types. There are 6 old types and 4 new types. Old types behave similarly for the most part and are equally threatening. The 4 new types have differing personalities. The new types use various methods to try to kill the player. This ranges from using their long hair to tie up the player or to using a candlestick or crowbar to attack him or her. One of the 4 new types can teleport and can be a particular nuisance to the player. Walter Sullivan himself is also a ghost and attacks using a wide range of weapons from pipes to pistols. He also sometimes uses a chainsaw or wields 2 pistols at the same time. Walter as a ghost can be attacked and forced to the ground and then stomped upon. Ghosts are ultimately the manifestations of things from Walter Sullivan's subconscious mind. Overall, ghosts are difficult and annoying monsters that enjoy popularity in the Silent Hill universe for that very reason. Double Head. Double Heads are canine monsters in Silent Hill 3 that tend to appear in groups, usually of 2 or 4, and attack the player upon sight. Their heads are split vertically down the middle from their jawline, and each side of the head functions independently, as if they're 2 canines instead of 1. This is how the monster gets its name. It's possibly blind in its left eye. Double Heads roam in packs and are easily distracted by things they can eat. They're aggressive opponents, moving quickly and lunging at the player or gnawing at their legs. If multiple Double Heads attack, they tend to form a circle and surround their victim. Beef jerky can also be used to distract them. Double Heads are a manifestation of the protagonist Heather Mason's subconscious mind, greatly influenced by the burning image of Alessa Gillespie and her strong dislike of dogs. The split jaw of the monster is a nod to Cerberus of Greek mythology, as Double Heads are intended to be the watchdogs of hell. Overall, Double Heads are a different sort of popular monster encountered in the game and hold the distinction of being the first monsters encountered in Silent Hill 3. This was done to convey that the player was about to enter a hellish world, evocative of the watchdog of hell tag of Cerberus, and in turn, Double Heads. Sepulcher. Sepulcher is the first boss encountered in Silent Hill: Homecoming. He's a manifestation of the guilt that Sam Bartlett, the mayor of Shepherd's Glen, faces over murdering his son as a human sacrifice to the Order and their god. Sepulcher is a cross between a corpse and a monstrous tree, and hangs from the ceiling. His size and mass allow him to smash a human with a single strike, like he did with Sam Bartlett. Sepulcher, while hanging from the ceiling, attacks with his huge paws, but his mobility is limited. He can also create shockwaves by hitting the ground. Sepulcher can be stunned using melee or ranged attacks after he drops from the ceiling. His arms do a large amount of damage. It's recommended that the player attack Sepulcher's arms with a melee weapon. Sepulcher, apart from representing Sam Bartlett's guilt, also represents his son Joey's suffocation as he was buried. The name Sepulcher is a reference to how Jesus Christ was buried alive, much like Joey. The tree aspect of Sepulcher is probably a reference to how Joey loved gardening. Overall, Sepulcher is a popular boss with religious undertones and is considered one of the scariest and most hideous bosses in the Silent Hill universe. Romper. The Romper is a humanoid ape-like creature that pins down its prey after attacking with a body blow, and is first shown in the first Silent Hill game. The beast has dull brown skin that resembles a coat, and its 2 front limbs are longer than its hind limbs, which are in parity with the great apes. The muscular creature has a belt around its neck and has a slit for a mouth. It's better to avoid the creature since it can easily trample the player trying to fight it, and can cause some severe damage if it ends up biting the player's throat. The best course of action when dealing with the Romper is to use a rifle or a shotgun. The player can also take down the creature with a handgun if they have the patience, but close proximity to the Romper could be deadly since it can jump on the player even before the players had a chance to hit the creature. Another way of handling the creature is to switch off the torchlight and perform a sneak attack with the hammer. The Romper is an embodiment of Alessa Gillespie's dread of adults and people older than her who had exploited her at the Order. The Romper's overpowering figure stands as a reminder of this. Bottom. Bottoms are a type of creature with deformed faces dangling from the bottom of their torso. Bottoms were first introduced in Silent Hill 4 during the second visit to Ashfield Heights. These creatures are usually naked, and their bodies look like lumpy, cancerous heaps of flesh. Since they don't have legs, they walk on a pair of giant arms. These creatures only attack the player if the player gets too close to them. They don't move and only keep repeating the word receiver while pointing toward the player till the time the player gets close to them, which symbolizes Harry Townsend's role as 21st Sacrament. These tenacious creatures are quite dangerous because of their agility and speed. The Bottom is a manifestation of Walter Sullivan's parents, created by his memory of disdain towards them. The fact that the creature was first encountered in Ashfield Heights adds to the legitimacy of the symbolism. The creature's presentation with the head at the bottom and outstretched hands symbolize Walter's birth in the lithotomy position. The 2 deformed head-like lumps on the top of the creature represents the parents of Walter, whom he didn't know. Gumhead. Gumheads are humanoid creatures with a resemblance to apes and are often found in groups. They have grey decaying skin with their face resembling humans, albeit with deformed facial features. They have thin tails and make screeching noises like monkeys. They have the tendency to seize pipes or golf sticks from Harry, which can only be retrieved once Harry has killed them. They usually attack with their arms or by biting, but can also use golf sticks or pipes to attack once they've procured them. They aren't as intelligent as human beings and attack in a playful manner. There are 2 types of Gumheads. The old type is the one most commonly encountered throughout the game. They have a large outgrowth of flesh in front of their throat, which looks like a protruding heart or a second head. It looks like their face was stretched out to form a second head. The new type has red marks across its body, which look like cuts and scratches. Both their heads have prominent faces. The Gumheads represents Walter Sullivan's reclusive views of society, his fear of grown-ups as a child, and the general negativity of humanity. They appear masculine beings and not feminine, likely symbolizing men from Walter's perspective. Float Stinger. The Float Stinger is a boss in Silent Hill that Harry encounters on the terrace of the post office, across from the Alchemilla Hospital. It's a mature form of twin feeler. The creature looks like a giant moth similar to the Bombyx morai moth, a type of silk moth. In spite of looking like a moth, the Float Stinger uses its stinger to attack at close range, while it spews motes of poison to attack adversaries from a long range. The player should maintain distance when they're trying to attack the creature and resort to using firearms. But if the player decides to attack the creature from a close range, and constantly move in order to avoid it, once the player kills the creature, they're teleported from the other world to the fog world. The Float Stinger reminds the player of the insects hanging on the walls of a lesser Gillespie's room in a home. The creature also symbolizes transformation, as it's an evolution of the twin feeler, similar to Alessa's transformation into Cheryl Mason. Splitworm. The Splitworm is the first boss encountered in Silent Hill 3, which attacks Heather Mason. It's a humongous worm protected by an unsusceptible lavender-colored outer layer, but the flesh within the layer is susceptible. The outer layer splits vertically to reveal a massive set of jaws which serves as the creature's primary mode of attack. The creature has no eyes or nostrils and attacks its adversaries by burrowing in and out of openings around its lair. It can also stomp the ground, creating minor quakes that cause little to no damage but makes the player lose their balance. The creature can also employ its instant kill attack, where the worm stands up, screeching before lunging at the player. Since the creature appears at the beginning of the game, the only weapon the player can use is the handgun. The worm draws inspiration from Splithead, which appears in the first game. The worm symbolizes Alessa's fear of worms, but also serves as an underlying symbol for childbirth, a recurring theme throughout the game. Parasite. The Parasite is a reddish-brown slug-like creature that only appears in the first Silent Hill game. The creature is only about half a meter in length and can control the minds of its victims. The preys of the Parasite bleed from every orifice of the body and have the tendency to develop hunchbacks. The Parasite had infected everyone at the Alchemilla Hospital other than Michael Kaufman, including the puppet doctors, puppet nurses, and Sybil Bennett. However, the Parasite is vulnerable to Agliofotis, which had annulled all the effects of the Parasite on puppet Sybil Bennett. Two-Back. The Two-Back is one of the strongest non-boss creatures in Silent Hill Origins. The creature seems to be a deformed humanoid, with its lower anterior region merging into the lower back of another creature. Their appearance seems suggestive of two creatures performing a sexual act. The larger humanoid at the bottom has arms that have needle-like protrusions at the end, while the smaller humanoid at the top has these protrusions for both his arms and legs. The larger humanoid is hunched over with his head dangling down, while the smaller humanoid is arched back against its belly. Two-Back usually attacks Travis Grady by ramming into him or spewing acid on him. The creature can also pin down Travis after lunging at him while driving its needle-like protrusions into his chest and spewing acid on his face. 2 represents the sexual frustration of Travis, a lonely truck driver who can't have normal relationships. Patients are gruesome female monsters found in the hospital world and later in the apartment world of Silent Hill 4. These monsters have mutilated faces and are very tall. They have grey skin spots and have chunks of flesh missing from their bodies. They wear grey hospital gowns and carry a pipe with them, which also happens to be their primary weapon of choice. Unlike other monsters in the game, they move fluidly. Usually they make low-pitched noises while breathing, but when hit, they make grunts similar to belching noises. These creatures can take an insane amount of damage and can also cause a lot of damage with their slow yet relentless attacks. They usually appear in groups of 2 or more, and the best way to tackle them is with the axe. Sullivan's fear of hospitals and the like may be expressed through the patients, who are imposing and perhaps manifestations of his aversion to them. Weeping Bat. The Weeping Bat is a creature with greyish skin and appears in Silent Hill Downpour. The creature has a deformed face with a massive mouth and tiny eyes sunken into its flesh. Similar to bats, it has a pinched face, but the creature has a muscular and defined upper torso with very thin limbs. They have 3 claws on their hands that they use to attack their adversaries, while they use the claws on their legs to attach themselves to walls. They're formidable adversaries to deal with on the ground, but it becomes even more challenging when they attach themselves to walls and pounce on players. In order to attack the creature, the player first needs to lure them to the ground if the player is low on ammo. In order to stop the flurry of melee attacks, the player needs to time their hits properly. When dealing with this creature, the player needs to be careful of the beast's double fist attack. When the creature raises both its hands, the player should block the strike before they resume attacking. Caliban. The Caliban is a disfigured and contorted humanoid creature. These creatures walk on all fours where their hind legs are actually their arms, and their spine is curved backwards in a way that their legs are positioned over their own shoulder, with their head placed between the legs. These creatures are not very agile, but their weight itself is a potent weapon. Caliban has two types of attacks in its arsenal. The first one is its ground-pounding attack, where it raises its legs and then moves them away from its front portion, which also happens to be the most devastating attack a player can face from a normal monster. Caliban can also perform a lunging attack, which performs after swaying back a bit. It's best to avoid the creature if it makes any sudden movement. The best way to deal with the creature is to use the shotgun. Feral. Ferals are creatures that look like dogs and appear in Silent Hill Homecoming. These are muscular dogs that have no skin, eyes, or ears, and have fresh blood dripping from their bodies. These creatures are very powerful and attack the player by lunging at them or by nipping their throat. When they lunge at the player, they keep biting the player till the time they're shaken off. These creatures are very agile, making it very hard for the player to hit them without a swift weapon. They can be seen in groups throughout the game feeding on corpses. These canines growl before attacking the player. They roar while attacking, yelp when they're hit, and let out a high-pitched growl when they're killed. These creatures symbolize Alex's father penchant for hunting, where he would often skin his kills. His father had also admitted in a confession booth that he cared more for his dog than Alex, indicating that ferals represent parental neglect. Night Flutter. The Night Flutter is a wind creature that has an uncanny resemblance to the air screamer that appears later on in the game. The creature has a solid mass of worms instead of a head, quite similar to the Wormhead. The creature is very agile, which makes it a dangerous adversary, along with the fact that it can take quite an amount of damage before it's defeated. Adding to the difficulty, the Night Flutter is accompanied by various ground monsters who attack the player when they try to fight the Night Flutter. In such a scenario, the best thing the player can do is run away. It's very difficult to kill the Night Flutter with any melee weapon. Firearms like the shotgun are the best way to combat the Night Flutter. But if the player has enough ammunition, they can approach the Night Flutter with the handgun, but it might take a lot of time to defeat the creature. The creature represents a lesser sphere of worms. The worms also symbolize change that is associated with the other world or deterioration in the same way ants are depicted in the works of Salvador Dali. Wormhead. The Wormhead is a stronger version of the Groaner and only shows up following the shift to Otherworld. The creature looks like a dog, but instead of a head, it has a solid mass of worm similar to the Night Flutter. The dull, brown-colored creature is hairless, and its skin appears to be rotting. These creatures are sensitive to sound and are quite agile, and can sense the player's footstep or a gunshot. However, these creatures are quite easy to avoid, just like its Fog World counterpart, the Groaner. A lesser sphere of dogs manifests in the form of a Wormhead. The creature could also symbolize Harry losing his grasp on reality and the overall deterioration of everything around him. Siam. The Siam is a monster that appears in Silent Hill Homecoming. The creature is a humanoid comma strapped together with bondage gear. The front side of the creature is male that attacks the player with huge club-like muscular arms. The creature also appears to be wearing boots and some form of chest armor. The back side of the creature is female, with her feet dangling freely behind and hands tied above her head. She appears to be wearing extremely uncomfortable stilettos. The Siam's mouth appears where the male and the female wrist have been tied together, resembling a star-nosed mole. For a creature its size, it's extremely agile, especially while covering short distances, and can cause some extreme damage to the player after knocking them over. The best way to deal with the creature is to use a powerful weapon like a shotgun. When the player is running short on ammo, they should try to hit the female side of the creature with the axe where it's most vulnerable. If the player is able to stun the creature with a heavy blow from the axe, it's easy to kill the creature with one hit. The Siam often runs away in a situation like this, allowing the player to shoot at its vulnerable female side. Water Guardian. The Water Guardian is an amphibious monster that appears in Silent Hill Book of Memories. The creature has 4 arms and an enlarged abdomen. The lair of the creature is a large pool with pipes on the edges. In the first half of the battle, only the creature's hands are visible that appear out of the pipes to attack the player. It seems that the monster can summon itself or its limbs after combining itself with the water anywhere in the pool. When the creature shows up, it attacks the player by trying to launch away at them all by sucking the player into its mouth. The best way to avoid damage is to maintain a safe distance from the monster. The creature is a manifestation of the subconscious resolution of Trent Baker, and the fight between the monster and the player symbolizes the assertion of dominance in order to change reality. Ariel. The Ariel is a monster that looks very similar to puppets and appears in Silent Hill Origins. These creatures usually hang upside down from the ceiling and attack the player by choking or grabbing them. These creatures have an additional pair of hands instead of legs, which they use to grab onto the strings they hang from. When the player attacks them, they fall from the ceiling and stand on their hands and begin to kick the player. These creatures are usually weak since they're made of fragile porcelain, but can be quite dangerous in confined spaces where they show up in numbers. In order to avoid these creatures, the player needs to turn off the flashlight and be careful about making loud noises. Once the player hits them, they're stunned, rendering them defenseless, making it the perfect opportunity to kill them for good. This also happens to be the best course of action because once they stand up, they move very fast, making it difficult to get rid of them. Hummer. Hummers are flying creatures that appear in Silent Hill 4 and also Silent Hill the arcade. The small creatures are black in color and appear to be a mix of hummingbirds and bats, where they have pointed needle-like beaks like the hummingbird and streamlined bodies like bats. These creatures are quite easy to detect since their wings flap extremely fast, making a buzzing sound while moving. These creatures aren't very dangerous, only causing minimal damage to the player when they're alone. However, when they attack the player in swarms or in addition to other foes, they're quite irritating. In order to kill the creature, the player needs to grab them and stomp on them. However, if they aren't crushed properly, they recompose themselves and start flying again. It's also the only creature in the game that's affected by bug spray. The One Truth. The One Truth is a bigger and more powerful version of the Wheelman. These creatures are also known as the Dummy and appear in Silent Hill 4. Unlike the Wheelman, this creature has the ability to move up and down walls because instead of being attached to a wall, these creatures are suspended inside a metal square with its flesh stretched out and attached to each corner. This helps the creature escape from attacks, making it a more dangerous adversary than the Wheelman. The creature attacks exactly like the Wheelman with its powerful arms, however, causing a lot more damage. Another challenge faced by the players comes from the dummies produced by the creature, who are immortal and can injure the player. These dummies also react when the creature gets hit. Stalker. Stalkers are creatures that appear to be evolved from larval stalkers who have passive behavior and are usually harmless. These creatures are first encountered in the sewers of Silent Hill. Later, they can also be seen at the lakeside amusement park and a few parts of nowhere. These creatures are invisible, usually wield a knife, and have the proportions of a small child. The main threat from the creatures lies in the fact that they're invisible and can't be detected till the time they attack the player. They also confuse the player into believing that they're larval stalkers. The player can easily kill them with gunfire from the handgun, or by using the hammer or the axe if they have sufficient time. However, if the player is cornered, it's advised to use the shotgun to mow them down before they can cause any lethal damage. Larval Stalker. Larval stalkers are childlike creatures that are dark yet translucent. They also have short and pointy tails. These creatures are absolutely harmless, although they sometimes walk directly toward the player. These creatures roam around the room at a very leisurely pace, making squeaking noises before disappearing into thin air. These creatures are immortal, but in order to get rid of them, the player needs to point the flashlight toward them. In the presence of these creatures, the radio becomes completely static. These creatures are evoked from the memories of Alessa Gillespie, who was bullied after school by her classmates, who also told her to kill herself when she went home. Slurper. Slurpers are humanoid monsters that appear in Silent Hill 3. These creatures resemble men wearing masks and also appear to be wearing leather shots. These creatures also have a long tube-like snout like an anteater, with a prominent mouth consisting of teeth and lips. They also have a long tongue which they use to slurp corpses and blood. Slurpers also have the tendency to make screeching sounds of various pitches. These creatures are often encountered in groups and usually pop out of a small crawl space to attack their victims. These intelligent creatures can be exceptionally deceptive, and the fact that they show up in large numbers adds to the danger. They usually yank the player's feet, knocking them to the floor before stomping on them for additional damage. These creatures have poor eyesight, but are extremely sensitive to sound and crawl directly toward the source of it. To avoid these creatures, the player needs to walk cautiously and turn off the flashlight. The best way to kill these creatures is to use a firearm equipped with a silencer. Jimmy Stone. Jimmy Stone is a resident of Silent Hill and appears throughout the Silent Hill games. He's a cultist and a descendant of Reverend Stone. He serves as the executioner and priest at the cult, which is dedicated to the angel of rebirth, Valtiel. Stone has been nicknamed the Red Devil because of the red hood that he wears while performing ritualistic murders. Stone was first mentioned in an article in Silent Hill 2, but made his first physical appearance in Silent Hill 4 as a ghost. Stone fell victim to the rituals of the sacraments when Walter Sullivan decided to perform the 21 sacraments of the descendant of the Holy Mother, which was meant to resurrect the god of the cult who would usher in their version of the eternal paradise. Lobotomy. Lobotomy is a monster that looks like a human and appears in Silent Hill Revelation. The creature looks like a malnourished man with no facial features who instead has a large vertical hole in its face through which it makes roaring noises. Lobotomy also has an exposed brain. This creature appears for a brief period of time within the Brookhaven Asylum. The player comes across the creature while looking for Leonard Wolff. The creature manages to subdue the player for a brief while but gets killed when Heather fires a bullet right into the gaping hole in his face. It's possible to assume that the creature was once just a normal human being who was experimented upon by Claudia Wolff and the Order of Valtiel. Straitjacket. Straitjacket is a humanoid creature that appears to be trapped in a straitjacket made out of its own skin. These creatures look very similar to lying figures, but lack the feminine features of the creature, who seem to be covered with a stretched sheet of skin. These creatures run pretty fast, and have a variety of attacks like spraying acid balls which they grapple with rather than spraying. These creatures change the player until they escape to another room or kill the creatures. If the player fails to react quickly, these creatures will swarm the player in massive hordes. The creatures usually attack the player by latching onto them with their legs and spewing acid on their face. If encountered alone, these are fairly easy adversaries to get rid of, and the player can even kill them with their bare hands. Puppet Doctor. Puppet Doctor is an adversary that's been affected by a parasite, causing them to have a hunchback appearance. They can usually be seen wearing hospital gear with a white lab coat and a tie. They appear in the Otherworld version of Alchemilla Hospital, exclusively on the first floor, where they attack the player with knives. These doctors make horrible groaning noises and let out a long sigh once they're defeated. These creatures aren't very fast, and the best way of defeating them is to use the hammer on them. The puppet doctors represent how Alessa felt about the hospital, where all the doctors and nurses seem to be puppets being influenced by the cult and the drug PTV. Phantom. The Phantom is a huge monster that appears as the final boss of Silent Hill the arcade, in the Otherworld version of Toluca Lake. The body of the creature comprises a giant head with a mouth full of sharp teeth and eyes covered with skink, similar to deep-sea fishes. The creature also has pale blue arms that project out from its jaw. The head of the creature is covered in tendrils that simultaneously look like wet blonde hair and tentacles. The creature usually attacks by extending its arms to punch the player or using its hair to slash them. Alternatively, she might also try to grab the player and swallow them whole with her hair. The ending of the game depends on how the player defeats the Phantom. Swarm. Swarms are creatures that look like insects and appear in Silent Hill Homecoming. These are large creatures with bodies of beetles and flexible heads like leeches. They also possess a shiny black exoskeleton. These creatures fly with the help of the large wings and hover in front of the player before attacking them. These creatures have sharp reaches on the edges of the legs, which they use to latch onto the player. Once they've latched onto the player, it's extremely difficult to remove them. Once the creature has latched onto the player, they keep on draining their blood till the time they're removed by performing a dodge action. The player can kill the creature while they're hovering before the attack, or simply stomp on them when they're on the ground. These creatures are quite weak and can be killed with a single hit from any weapon. Groaner. The Groaner looks like a massive dog with brown skin and a huge set of jaws. This hairless dog has an uncanny resemblance to greyhound dogs and is an extremely fast runner. These creatures are extremely malnourished, making them look starved and even dead at times. These creatures are extremely sensitive to sound and pursue the player upon hearing a gunshot or footsteps. They usually appear in outdoor areas and can be easily dodged if the player is cautious. When these creatures spot their prey, they usually charge them, running circles around their prey before leaping onto them to bite or lunging at them with brutal force. It's extremely difficult to hit them with the melee weapon because of their small size and speed. These creatures are extremely persistent, and the best way to get rid of them is by using a firearm, but it's best to avoid them. Their presence is signaled by panting or gentle tapping of claws on the pavement. Tuberculosis. Tuberculosis is the boss that appears in Silent Hill the arcade. The creature looks like a dragon that twitches and crashes around as if it were in constant pain. The right hand of the creature is shaped like an axe, which it uses to attack adversaries and also to protect itself, while the left hand of the creature has claws. The creature has wings that stretch out from its triceps to its torso, which it uses for gliding around. Because of its impressive capability to jump, it often takes off its wings. At times, the creature has also been seen floating without its wings, suggesting that it uses some sort of telekinetic powers to hover around. The skin around the head of the creature is ripped, revealing many black eyes and dense muscular tissue underneath, while its face is elongated with a mouth full of sharp teeth. The creature's most vulnerable point is the bulge on its chest, which it usually covers with the axe on its right hand. Hanged Scratcher. Hanged Scratchers are found in the sewers of Silent Hill, which is why they're also called sewer creatures or sewer demons. These creatures look like reptiles and have green-colored bodies while the heads are white. They make distinctive clicking noises with their claws while walking on hard surfaces, which is relatively easy to recognize. They have long and thin limbs similar to insects. They usually attack from the ceiling or from below and can often be seen in groups of 2 or 3. It's very difficult to deal with them when they show up in groups and surround their prey. These creatures are very agile on the ground and often apply their reach to their advantage. The fact that the sewers are quite dark adds to the difficulty of dealing with them. The best way to deal with them is to use a hammer or a firearm on them. Prisoner Minion. The Prisoner Minion is a humanoid monster that has a metal contraption on its head. These creatures are covered in tattoos and lacerations and wear brown pants with a cord. The strips of the metal contraption stress the faces, forcing them to smile with an open mouth, and also force open their eyes, which are blank white. The contraption seems to be bolted onto their head, which leads to blood constantly dripping from their mouths that cover the chest and neck. There are 2 types of minions, namely the Stabber and the Brawler. The Brawler variant is a blunt melee fighter who has no special abilities, but fights using lethal jabs, punches and kicks. The Stabber, on the other hand, is more agile and tends to move in and out, making it more difficult to attack them. Because of their unpredictable movements, hitting them with ranged attacks is very difficult. Wood Guardian. The Wood Guardian is a humanoid creature that resembles a living tree and is composed of stumps and branches. The creature has a large piece of wood on its face, giving it a hooded appearance. Its appendages are long and skinny, with branches stemming from its back that gives the creature an uncanny resemblance with the Grim Reaper. It can originally be found planted at the base of a giant dead tree surrounded by wood saplings. The Guardian protects itself by impaling attackers with its spiked roots, while the saplings distract the player. The Guardian loses itself from the base and attacks the player with spiked roots after it's sustained enough damage. Toby Archbold. Toby Archbold was a priest of the Holy Mother sect within the Order. He tried to increase the influence of his own sect after the demise of Jimmy Stone and George Roston. In order to increase his influence, he resorted to selling marijuana illegally. Toby reopened the Wish House orphanage and became a member of the city council for his contributions towards society. Walter Sullivan pushed him off a cliff during a trip to Mexico, making him the only character in the series to be killed outside the States. He's also known as Victim 14 and has a visible head injury, implying that he died because of cranial trauma. In spite of being very agile, his attacks result in moderate damage. Mandarin. The Mandarin is a female humanoid creature with its upper body covered in a garment that looks like a straitjacket. The creature has hideous large arms that have large lips on them. They usually attack the player with tentacles that pop up from the lips on their arms from below the floor through the mesh grating. The player doesn't encounter these creatures on the floor. These creatures are not very dangerous, and the best way to kill them is to use a gun, since the player can't reach them with any melee weapon. However, if the player wants to save ammo and time, they can simply run past them, and it's very easy to avoid them as long as the player doesn't stand directly above them. Delusion. Delusions are ordinary humans who lack any facial features and instead have stitches sewing flaps of skin over any facial features. These creatures are nothing but hallucinations of Heather Mason that beckons her to join her true self, which is Alessa Gillespie. Experience is the first hallucination before meeting Douglas Cartland, and the second time she hallucinates is when she encounters a security officer in Central Square shopping center. Heather's delusions serve as symbolism for her fear of strangers and society. The delusions can also be an effect of the other world. Light Guardian. The Light Guardian is a muscular humanoid creature that has a metal helmet shaped like a cone which also covers its face. The creature has a hole in its chest cavity through which the player can see its beating heart. The creature has many of his body parts missing, while some of it has been replaced with metal appendages. The creature's torso is connected to its legs by a set of metal rings, and instead of its left arm, it has a cylindrical metal arm with the forearm section being studded. The creature has metal talons instead of feet, and it's seen wearing a red loincloth. The creature shows up from a cathedral before attacking the player. In order to damage the Guardian, the player first needs to destroy all the metal parts on its body. After that, the creature resorts to attacking the player by firing a beam out of the hole on the end of its helmet. It also calls upon emblems made of light, which it uses as a shield, and can also fire at the player with it.
Oh God, not again.
Tormented Soul. The Tormented Soul appears in the Silent Hill Downpour as a passive monster. The creature is incapable of harming the player in any way, but can directly get the player killed by getting in his way while the player is trying to dodge the void. The humanoid creature looks like mangled bodies that have been torn apart and hang by their own flesh inside grated crates. They squirm in agony and pain without any means of escape. They're covered in their own blood, with their faces appearing to be frozen in a permanent state of misery. The Void. The Void is a creature that bears a resemblance to a bright red light similar to a vortex. The creature chases the player and obliterates anything in its way. The creature has the ability to slow down time, distort the visuals, and flake off the skin of the player. Since the creature is immortal, the player can only run away from it before it kills him. In order to slow down the creature, the player can knock over tormented souls. Toadstool. Toadstools are creatures that look like giant shiitake mushrooms growing as tall as the protagonist. The creature is reddish-brown in color and terminates in a fleshy patch, and often resorts to taking the shape of a human head. Another variation of the creature is known as white stools and functions in an identical fashion to the toadstool. However, as the name suggests, white stools are white in color, and their tentacles culminate into heads similar to snakes. They also grow in tighter groups compared to their reddish-brown counterparts. These mushroom-like creatures usually grow out of the ground to obstruct the path of the protagonist. They don't present much of a threat when the player walks into them and also get destroyed in the process. The player can easily eliminate them with the help of any melee weapon. Sniffer dog. As the name suggests, sniffer dogs are creatures that resemble canines and have very long tongues, which they use to drain out the fluids from the body of their victims. These creatures have leathery skin, which seems to be decaying. The male sniffer dogs have green-tinted flesh and fur with prominent eyes and ears and blade-like canines. The female variant, on the other hand, doesn't have eyes or ears and has purple-tinted fur and flesh with sharper, longer claws. These creatures can be seen feeding on carrion and often appear in groups. It's very difficult to outrun them because of their speed. It's advised not to run in a straight line in order to evade them. However, even this might not be enough because of their incredible speed and lunge length. These creatures aren't aggressive until the player comes in close proximity to them. The male dogs are not as powerful as the female dogs. Usually, the male dogs attack by leaping at the protagonist, while the female dogs grab onto the legs of the protagonist, pinning him down while their companions attack him. Air Screamer. The Air Screamer is a creature that looks very similar to a pteranodon, a prehistoric flying creature. But in typical Silent Hill fashion, the creature has its torso and legs covered in leathery skin and has a human-like elongated head with two fish-like glassy eyes. The creature has half the height of a human being, which allows it to have an extensive wingspan. The creature gets its name from the sound it makes while attacking or getting attacked. They usually attack by biting or with their talons. The creatures are very agile, making it difficult to hit them with a melee weapon, so the player should instead try to shoot them in the air. In order to save ammo, the player should run away from the creature when they hear the flapping noises of the wings. The creature usually flies away after receiving some damage and then proceeds to reanalyze and attack the protagonist from a different angle. In order to avoid getting hit by the creature's talons, the player should resort to running in a zigzag pattern. Bloodsucker. The Bloodsucker looks like three leeches infused together at the base and functions like the tentacles of an octopus. The creature has an insatiable thirst for blood and therefore is drawn to any possible source. It has a tendency to protect its prey and responds violently if the protagonist gets in close proximity to either a puddle of blood or a blood pack. In order to sustain itself, the creature breaks free from the fridge and grabs onto the protagonist, trying to feed on his blood. Usually, the creature is harmless and doesn't bother the protagonist unless it's disturbed because of its scavenging nature. Remnant. The Remnants only appear in Cedar Grove Sanitarium in Silent Hill Origins. These creatures only appear as dark humanoid shadows while in the light. When they see the protagonist, they make screeching noises. These creatures immediately attack the protagonist when light shines upon them. These creatures can deal heavy damage by launching forward in quick lunges, attacking with their restraints, so it's best to deal with them from a distance with firearms. The player can also defeat them with melee weapons with the help of carefully timed strikes. The player can avoid the creature by switching off the flashlight and waiting till they pass, since they're pretty sensitive to sound. The player can also perform a one-hit kill by throwing a heavy object at them. When the creature dies, it makes a shrill noise full of pain. Mumbler. The Mumbler is a small monster that the players encounter in Silent Hill. The creature gets its name from a mumbling sound it makes while approaching the protagonist. These creatures have a giant hole instead of facial features and are reddish-brown in color with 3 large claws for shooting from the arms. These creatures replaced the Grey Child in the Japanese and European versions of the game, since the Grey Child looks very similar to real-life children. All the North American versions of the game featured both the characters in Annie's bar as well as in the sewers. The creatures use their claws to deliver extremely powerful attacks after they jump onto the legs of the victims, immobilizing them. These creatures aren't very agile. Instead, they're very strong and appear in large numbers. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share it. And for more exciting videos, please subscribe to our channel. Marvelous verdict. The Silent Hill franchise has always been known for its complex and terrifying monsters. What we've learned from the video is that these monsters are more often than not manifestations of the psychological and emotional traumas of the characters that encounter them. These monsters also serve as a reflection of the dark and disturbing nature of the human psyche. Thus, the legacy that these monsters convey is one of fear and introspection. The well-thought-out design of these monsters in their varied and grotesque forms has also intrigued and captivated fans of the franchise. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.